Hey everybody, it's Colin from Pastor Mac Real Estate in Merritt Island, Florida. How's everybody doing today? Well, anyway, I'm I'm back here with another one of my BPO tutorial videos. I just put one out several days ago, my video number one, which is basically just a introduction to BPO. So hope everybody liked that one and hopefully found it pretty informative. So I'm going to go into another one today. The one I got here, I'm just going to call this one video number two, the basics of a BPO. So this one, a little bit more in depth than the first one, and kind of like my other video. Like I said, I'll try to keep these things, straight to the point and just basic as I can. But this one's a little bit more content, so there's going to be a few more things I'm going to go into on this one. But purpose of this video is just pretty much to basically just kind of break down, kind of like a course outline, if you would. Basically, just the components, just the basics, different types of information involved when doing just a standard drive-by BPO. But anyway, I'm going to go into all this stuff. So just kind of one by one, I'm going to explain pretty much just what each one is and try to keep it as basic as I can. So first thing to remember with BPOs, you're going to have two different types. Typical, the most common one is typically is going to be what they call a drive-by or exterior BPO, which you typically just you take photos of the subject property on the outside. 5 to 6 photos on average. Maybe a little bit more if there's any damage you had to document. Suppose there was a storm, because we are down here in Florida, for example. I've had those. And then there's also what they call a full interior, where you actually have to gain access into the property by the owner, or electronic lockbox or what have you. But those are a little bit different. But generally, those those are you're doing a complete inside and outside valuation of the property. So that's I won't go too much into that really. So basically, the first component on your BPO form. Basically, it might vary a little bit depending on the company you're doing them with, but they're pretty standard. But basically, the first thing you're going to have when you pull up your form will be the property info. That's going to be basically for your subject property, the one property in question you're doing your BPO on. So all that is just a little form there. It's going to have the owner or owner's name, basically that just showing who legally owns the property. It'll have the call the APN assessor's parcel number. Basically, that's like for tax information. You're going to have the real estate taxes. You'll have to look up and put that in there. Then the assessed value. Typically, ours will usually just say like assessed value non-school for Florida. But basically, those four things. What I typically do when I do one, I just print out like an MLS. Just if you can find one on say MLS, whatever, just have some kind of document you can print out with all your subject info, so you have it right in front of you. I typically just make notes of that stuff. I just write it down. I put little notes on there just so I have it readily available, because that's the first thing you have to do when you start on the BPO form. You have to enter all your basic subject property information, because the company typically, they'll, the bank, or ultimately whoever is ordering the BPO on your property to begin with, they're going to want to see if there's any tax liens on the property. So typically, if you look it up and it says property taxes paid, then that's fine. So that's all that purpose is really. They just want to see what the value of the property is, who legally owns it, parcel number, and then if the taxes are either paid or delinquent. So that's all that is. Second thing typically is market data and marketability. Like I said, on some of these forms, I mean, this may not be in the exact order. I don't have a form in front of me, so this is basically just pretty much best I can remember. But that's usually the next thing that'll be on the form. And what the market data and marketability is, basically, that's just going over like market trends. There's a few questions you have to answer. They might ask you, for example, what homes are typically listing for, what they're selling for, because those are two different things depending on our market. How many of them might be rentals or owners or vacant, things like that. Depends on the company. One that I was doing most of my work with was Clear Capital. That's one I'm referring mostly to those because that's the ones I can remember the best. I did most of my work with them, but typically they'll ask you, the market trends, how many of them, if they're for rent or by owner, or vacant properties, that sort of thing. How many of them are rented or owned? They'll ask you if that's maybe the subject of property is like either an over improvement or an under improvement for the neighborhood. Basically, just if it's consistent with the other homes in the neighborhood. That's all that really is. I mean, that's not too complex. It's just pretty straightforward stuff. But some of those questions on those will on the format will kind of vary depending on the company, or what type of BPO it is you're doing. They're not all the same. If it's one that's in foreclosure, they might go a little bit more into detail with that kind of stuff. So just throwing that out there. Um, Everything else, basically a BPO form, that's basically the next thing pretty much you're going to do on these things. And that's going to have your, on the BPO form, that'll have your, typically your subject information will be there typically already, usually that'll already be populated. You're going to have to go and usually enter like your square footage, age, pool, garage, sort of things like that, some of the info, but a lot of times most of the information's already in there, but go back and check it. That's why I make notes of all this stuff, because you want to make sure your square footage, age, a lot of basically just your basic, specs on the property, the subject are, correct and accurate. So just make sure of that. And then you'll have also on that form, it'll have your list and your sale comps. You'll have three list comps, which are active, and then you have three sold comps, which are, closed. So basically that's going to have all your subject information there, which you have to look up. You have to put your square footage, age, if it has a garage, pool, carport, year built, anything, basically all the information about the home. Usually something about like the location, all that too. But basically, you want to have all that information. It's going to go inside that form, and you'll have to run adjustments on most of those. Most of the time, you run the adjustments mainly on your sold comps, but there are some formats where you have to run the adjustments for your list comps as well. So it all depends. But I won't go into all that stuff. I'm going to go into that like on some of my later videos and like actually like how to adjust in those figures. But I'm not going to go into that too much right now because that's a lot of info. So I don't want to make it too complex. But that's basically all that is. Another thing, subject photos. After that, you have to have you need your subject photos. Like I said, if it's a drive-by, you're looking at probably 5 to 6 photos on average. If there's any damage to the property or whatever, then you want to take additional photos of things like that. But just to document it. Typically, you just need like front photo, side of the home, street, two street views, mailbox address verification or whatever on the home. So 5 or 6 photos just to verify the address is accurate and correct. If you're doing like the interior, like I mentioned earlier, those things you might have 28 to maybe 30 photos, depending. That's about average for most of those when I was doing those. But that's pretty much it. You just want to have all your photos so they know that which properties are which, and if there's, they can also you can with the photos you can also compare your condition of the properties because the condition's a factor too. But and finding the one most comparable. But I won't go too much into that. I'm going to go some of those other videos because it's a lot too soon. I won't do that. Um, Basically, the comp photos here, that's the next thing. You have to have all your comparables. So once you've had your subject photos in there, you got to have your photos for all your comps. So typically, you're gonna have 3 listed and 3 sold. So you need photos of each one of those. Typically, I just take them off like Flex MLS, for example. Just you have to basically just download like a PDF file, for example. That's how most of those are. Most of the time, you have to just do like a PDF file. Like say if it's if it's an actual MLS document that I use like on Flex MLS here, do a PDF. There are some times where they'll just want to have like maybe just they'll want the basically like the MLS document if there is one on record, and then just like basically just like an image, just a photo of the home. And usually with those, most of the time you might have to do both depending on the format. Usually those you can just do like a JPG or a JPEG file and upload those. So you just basically follow the instructions. Just depends on what they tell you on those. So anyway, that's all that would be. Another thing after that, typically you're going to have like a docs and data section. And now what that is that's going to be basically for documents like on your subject property, for example, and then your comps. With the subject property, typically you're just going to need to have like if it's got like a like say like a flex, like basically like an MLS photo of like when the property was last sold. You can just upload one of those like a basically like a PDF file. Sometimes you come across a home that has been sold in 50 years and you can't find one. So what I do is I just print one off of say like RPR, Realtors Property Resource. That would work too, or whatever your like here we use Brevard County Property Appraiser. You could use that depending where you're at. So depending on your state or anything. So typically, you just want to have one of those documents just to show the property, and then have a tax document so you can show that like the property, like I mentioned earlier in the video, that the property taxes have been paid and it's not delinquent, or if it is. So that's what you need for the subject property. And then typically you'll need you should have about 8 in all, typically, depending, but or it might say like additional documents. If you need to upload another one, you might have 9, but typically just 2 for the subject properties, all you need. And then you'll typically have 6 other ones, 3 for your your active, like your list comps, and then your sold comps, three for those, so six. And typically all that is just an MLS document. Just they want to see that the home is legitimate for sale or has been sold, just so they can match it. They want to see everything's legal. That's all. So those are generally just going to be PDF files for those most of the time. So that's how you upload those. So there's a separate section for all this stuff. And after that will be typically your sales and pricing comparison and marketing strategy. Now, what that is basically, you have to you have to look at all your comparables, and it's going to be a little bit more critical. I won't go too much into that right now because a lot of the stuff I'm gonna go way into later, because believe me, it gets very confusing at first when you're learning. It was for me, but basically, you're gonna compare all your prices, and the prices on the sale comps are typically going to be a little bit more critical than your list comps because they haven't sold yet. But anyway, the sales and pricing comparison, you want to compare the prices and basically find which one of your subject properties, uh, or which property is most comparable to the subject property. So usually you have like one list, and then basically one active and then one sold. So you want to have one of each that basically is the most comparable to your subject property. And basically you're just wanting to show them, pretty much, basically you're just trying to show your rationale. If you said, okay, this one is most comparable because of age, square footage, location, those sort of things. So that's all that is. And you come up with a pricing and uh, marketing strategy. I'll go into that in a second. But with that, I'm going to go into a lot of this stuff later too, because there's kind of a lot. I'm just wanting to give you guys a basic, idea of this. But with that being said, with the sales and pricing, you will have to factor in any repairs or improvements that are needed on the property. Um, Basically, like, you have to adjust, and those things. I mean, those are usually just estimates. Like if it needs a new roof or a mailbox, or just it could be $100, it could be $20,000, but you have to add in your any repairs that best of your knowledge. And I'm not a home repair guy or handyman, so a lot of this stuff are just estimates. But put in there, these are just estimates. The best of your knowledge, that what you think it would cost to fix these sort of items on the home if they're necessary. So you have to just kind of take those and then factor those into your sales and pricing to kind of determine a figure. And your figures are going to they always have to be within the comp range too. But like I said, I'll go into that stuff later, because it gets confusing. And then a marketing strategy, basically, and that's pretty much just coming with, like I say, an as is price. You have what the home is worth right now, say as is, and then the repaired price. And those are two different things. And yet again, those prices have to fall, even with repaired price, it has to fall within your comp range. So you can't have that number exceed what your comps are, because then usually they're not consistent. They'll kick it back, and you have to basically show that your numbers are consistent, because otherwise, then you might have to select new comps. I've had that before. So basically, your marketing strategy in a nutshell is basically just saying, well, okay, here's what my property is, basically what I believe it's worth based on the comparables. But you have to have something to substantiate. That's basically what I'm getting at there. So the numbers kind of have to just kind of be in the same ballpark as all that is. So basically that's what they're looking at. The kind of bottom line on this thing is based, what you've looked at in comparables, your pricing rationale, any repairs, things like that. You factored in and basically just found something that can back up what you say this property is worth. So that's pretty much it, really. Ultimately, the bank just wants to know if they can get their money back on these properties, is how they're going to be. So that's really all that is. But like I said, there's some of these other things I'm going to go into. I mean, this is kind of a long video, I know that, but I'm going to go into some of these things like in later videos. I'm going to try to break them down a little bit, and I think I got about 8, maybe 9 that I'm probably going to put out there eventually, but as I go. But a lot of these things I'll just kind of go into those individually, because at first it's a little overwhelming, and I don't want to give too much info. So anyway, one thing I would really suggest before I end the video, this these are basically the best of my knowledge, the best I can remember, because I don't have a BPO form in front of me. But these things would really be a lot easier. Like if you're learning how to do the BPO, let's say that another agent that's currently working on them, you can pull up the form and look at it. Or if you sign on with one of these companies to do them, I only did most of mine with like basically two companies. But if you sign on with a company, they'll send you some work, and then pull up your BPO form. I would recommend maybe just watching this video, referring to it while you have a form pulled up. And like I said, these may not be like in the exact order, but these basically I'm just trying to kind of give you guys like basically just the basic components of what makes up your typical BPO form. But if you have one to look at while you're, watching this video, then it'd be a lot easier, because then you can freeze it and just kind of look at it and kind of see what I'm referring to. And then it probably make a little more sense because I know it's a lot of info. But anyway, hope everybody likes this video. So anyway, I will hope everybody, enjoys it and hope that it helps and, makes these things a little bit easier. So look for me on my next video and I will see you next time. Bye bye.